Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Monday night. Yom Sheni. Let's light up the darkness. Our daf today, our page is Bava Basra 124. Bava Basra is the 23rd volume of the Talmud. We're working our way through chapter 8 of this Masechta, continuing our discussion of Mishna number 4 here in chapter 8. And this is the 1758th page of the Talmud. In our journey, there are 2,711 pages, so less than 1,000 to go. I saw there was a question here, what is our schedule? So for anyone who's new and doesn't know, we do this Sunday through Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific, Fridays at noon Pacific, and Saturday about 45 minutes to an hour after Shabbos ends in LA, so that varies during the year. At this time of year, Saturday night is going to be at about 8 o'clock, 8-ish, something like that, maybe even a little earlier, p.m. Pacific. Okay, who's in the house? Stephen in New Hampshire, Melissa in Great Neck, Lorraine in Texas, Yehuda in South Carolina, Shandora in the Bronx, Karen in Northern California, Joe in the Inland Empire, Bill in Mid-Missouri, Jonathan in Southern California, Jazzy Musica, welcome. You were asking about the schedule, so that's why I said it. Bella in Florida, Sharon in New Jersey, Guy in Ohio. You should be watching the game. Somebody can give me a score update toward the end of class. I grew up a Yankees fan. I have become a Dodgers fan. So, you know what? I'm out here more than 30 years in LA. I would have remained a Yankees fan, but my children grew up here, and my son is a rabid Dodgers fan. And we've been to so many Dodgers games together. And what can I say? I know the Dodgers much better now, and I'm a Dodgers fan. Bell, I've been absent a few days due to medical emergencies in my family. Me and my nephew under control but continued medical care. Bell, may you and all your loved ones have a refuah shlema, a complete healing and a complete and speedy healing. And we say amen. Bill's publishing the schedule. Thank you so much. Joe says 3-0 LA in the top of the third. Woo! Some people would say that if the Dodgers went out to a 3-0 lead, 3-game lead, that would make a boring World Series, but not for us. Frank in San Pedro, I'm glad you're here. Back to you in a moment. Chaim in Florida, Ella in Southern California, Samantha in Washington State, Alan in New York City, Marjorie in Georgia. Welcome, everybody. Today's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by our own Frank in San Pedro, a.k.a. Frank Broidy, who says, I dedicate this donation to all men and women who sacrificed for our independence and the future Jewish state and the future of Mashiach, the Messiah and the Messianic age. Wow, what a beautiful dedication, Frank. Great time to recall everybody who's been lost in this war. I think I saw that 770 soldiers have fallen, and the IDF have fallen in this war since 10/7. Not to mention the 1,200 who were murdered on 10/7 last year. They were killed for being Jews, and so that's considered a part of the state. Please God, may we have peace as soon as possible. May it be a secure and lasting peace. And per Frank's dedication, may the souls of all who've lost their lives, who've given their lives and who've lost their lives, for the benefit of Eretz Yisrael and Am Yisrael, may their neshamas have an aliyah, may they have a great elevation in the world of souls, and may our learning today lift them even a little bit higher. Frank, may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings, even beyond the blessings your ample imagination could conceive. And we say Amen. And I invite everyone to donate. We are in the Accidental Talmudist annual campaign. Donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. It costs money to produce content. We started a new employee at our company today. We're always managing the website, now the app that we have launched, creating content every day. It just costs money. It costs money. We are a nonprofit, and man, do you get a lot of bang for your buck when you donate to AT, because if your goal is to make sure more people around the world are learning and appreciating Torah, traditional Jewish wisdom, well, your donation here brings the Torah to so many people around the world, many of whom wouldn't be learning otherwise. So please donate. Donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. Okay, let's get to it. Our daf today, like I said, page 124 here in Tractate Bava Basra. We're picking it up, how far down the way? On page 123b, about halfway down 123b. So we've been talking about the double portion of the firstborn. By the way, if you missed yesterday's class, go back and make it up. Should have been a key daf. Utterly fascinating class about the relationship between Leah and Rachel and their firstborn children, Reuven and Yosef. Amazing. Not because I was so amazing teaching it, although I hope I did a good job, but it was really incredible material. So go back and make that up if you missed it. Okay, the sages taught the firstborn priest takes a double portion of the foreleg and of the jaw and of the maw. And these are parts of offerings when the Holy Temple is standing in Jerusalem, and certain kinds of offering are brought as opposed to an olah, which is an elevation offering, which is entirely consumed by the altar. There are other kinds of offerings where the priests who are serving at that time and bringing offerings get certain gifts for themselves and their families. So here what they're saying is if a priest was serving the temple, he received these portions of offerings that are given to the kohanim, to the priests, and then he died, so they would be passed down to his sons, and his sons are kohanim also, so they're permitted to eat that. Then does the firstborn get a double portion of those sacred gifts? Yes, he does. And a firstborn, whether he's a priest or a non-priest, takes a double portion of his father's sacrificial animals, meaning they've been set aside, and then the father died, presumably before he could bring them to the holy temple to be sacrificed when the temple is standing. And of the enhancement of the property that occurred after the death of their father. And this is going to be explained further down, how property that a person dies, he leaves property to his sons, and then that property, grows. Like it's an investment and money comes in, or he leaves a cow, for example, and the cow bears a calf. That would be enhancement of the property that the father left to the sons, even though the calf was born after the father died. So, according to this, the firstborn of his sons gets a double portion, let's say, in the value of that calf. Now, the Brisa continues. How so? To what type of enhancement is this referring? If their father left them a cow that was leased or rented in the possession of others, or if it was grazing in the meadow and it gave birth, then the firstborn takes a double portion of the rental income of that property that's rented out, or a double portion in the value of the calf of that cow that was grazing in the meadow. But if the inheritors built homes or planted vineyards after their father's death, thereby enhancing the property, meaning that the sons did something with the property that they inherited, and like they invested it, and then there was a return on that investment. Well, that wasn't just an enhancement that happened because of what the father had already arranged. Here, the inheritors, the sons, did something smart with the property that they inherited, and so it grew in value. The oldest one, the firstborn, does not get a double portion in the enhancement that was created by the effort or investment of the inheritors. Now, the Gemara analyzes... yeah, that's what I just said. Okay, so the Gemara analyzes the Brisa concerning this right to collect a double portion of the foreleg and the jaw and the maw. Now we're talking about kohanim, priests in the holy temple. What are the circumstances? If they came into the possession of their father, then it is obvious that the firstborn collects a double portion. And if they did not come into the possession of their father, then these items are merely property that is due to their father. And the firstborn does not take a double portion of property that is due to the deceased, in the same way that he would take a double portion of property that was already in the possession of the father. Something that is due to the father at the time of his death, when it comes in, the firstborn doesn't get a double portion of that. Something that was already in the possession of the father at the time of his death, the oldest, the firstborn, does get a double portion of that. The Gemara now explains, and remember, this is contrasted to the portions of land that were given to the children of Israel who left Egypt and then, after the 40 years in the desert, entered the promised land. We saw that the ones who left Egypt and didn't even make it to the promised land, but they received portions of land. So it wasn't in their possession, but it was due to them, and their children did inherit that. That was an exceptional circumstance. Normally, this is the law. Firstborn gets a double portion of stuff already in the possession of the father at the time of his death, not property that was due to the father. Now the Gemara explains. Here we are dealing with associates. I'm sorry. So here we're talking. So what are we talking about? These sacred portions of offerings that are brought in the temple that have been given to the father. I guess, and the father died before he could eat them. Or maybe he didn't even receive it already. Then why does the firstborn son get a double portion? Right? The Gemara is going to explain. Here we are dealing with associates of the priesthood. What are associates of the priesthood? These are people who have an arrangement with a particular priest to give him their priestly gifts. Right? So for example, when you're giving teruma, the first tithe that goes to the kohanim. So the person who's a farmer who brings in a crop, and then the first 2% is going to go to the priests. He can pick which priest he wants to give it to. There's like a family of Yisrael, just regular Jews. And they have a relationship with a particular priest, and so when it's time to tithe or to give parts of offerings to a priest, so they choose this priest. And it was a case where the animal was slaughtered while the father was alive, the owner of the offering. And the Tana of this Baraisa holds priestly gifts that were not yet separated are considered as though they have already been separated. In other words, they slaughtered the animal, but before it could be brought on the altar and the pieces of that animal given to the priest, the owner of the offering died. So, I think the priest died. The priest died, right? The priest died. Now we're talking about the firstborn of the priest. So the priest died before he could receive the offerings. So the animal that was designated to be brought as an offering was designated, and it was even slaughtered, but it was not, but that process of bringing, cutting it up into pieces, bringing the parts on the altar that will be burned on the altar, and giving the other parts to the priest, that process hasn't taken place yet. So are we going to give these, who are we going to give these pieces to? We're going to give it to the inheritors of the priest who died. And so the question is, does the firstborn get a double portion of those priestly gifts? Answer, yes. Because even though the father didn't receive it yet, the fact that the animal was designated and slaughtered, at that point, it's legally speaking already in the possession of the priest, even if he hasn't physically received it. The Gemara continues to analyze this baraisa. Why does the firstborn take a double portion of his father's sacrificial animals? Isn't it so that now we're talking not about the son of a priest, but the son of the owner of an animal that's being brought as an offering. Okay, that's different now. So the father designated the animals, maybe even slaughtered them, and then died. So now who owns the animals that have been consecrated? Are we going to say that it's like the sons inherit those animals? They still have to be brought as offerings, but now they're going to count as offerings being brought by the sons of the man who died? But the question is, well, didn't the father already consecrate these animals? Okay, then he died, but the animals are consecrated. They were consecrated by the father. Why is there any inheritance at all? They've been given away to God, as it were. That's what it means to consecrate them. Aren't they now the property of the Most Holy? What would it mean to inherit from that? Why does the firstborn take a double portion of the father's sacrificial animals? Isn't it so that once the father consecrates them, they belong to heaven? They're not his. So the Gemara answers, this is stated with regard to a case of offerings of lesser sanctity, such as peace offerings. And it is stated in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosei HaGalili, who says, these sacrificial animals are considered the property of their owners, as opposed to the property of heaven. As it is taught in a baraisa concerning one who steals another person's property, and then he takes a false oath denying that he committed that theft, and he thereby incurs the obligation to bring a guilt offering. Presumably at some point he feels bad about what he's done. He wants to make an atonement. So he's going to have to make a restoration of what he stole. He's going to have to pay a penalty to the victim of the theft. But because he also swore a false oath, he's going to have to bring a guilt offering, the special kind of offering for that crime. Obviously, this is only when the temple is standing. And about him, the verse states, quote, and commits a trespass against the Lord and deals falsely with his neighbor. That's Leviticus 5:21. So this verse serves to include offerings of lesser sanctity, which are the property of their owners. This is the statement of Rabbi Yosei HaGalili. So consequently, the firstborn collects a double portion of these offerings that are considered to still be in the possession of the one who consecrates them, because they're offerings of lesser sanctity. Get some caffeine. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol nihi b'divaro. Okay. The Brisa states, if their father left them a cow that was leased or rented in the possession of others, or if it was grazing in the meadow and it gave birth, then the firstborn takes a double portion of the rental income, the property that's rented out, or the firstborn takes a double portion of the value of this calf that was born to the cow that was owned by their father. At the time that the father died, there was only the cow, but after he died, the cow gave birth to a calf. So since that's part of the property, the firstborn gets a double portion of the value of this calf, as well as of the cow. Now, the Gemara asks, now that in a case where the cow was leased or rented to others, where the animals are not even in their owner's possession, you say that the firstborn takes a double portion of the rental income. Well then, in a case where the cow was grazing in the meadow, meaning the meadow that belongs to the father, is it necessary for the Baraisa to state that the firstborn is going to receive a double portion of that? Since we know that something that's not even in the father's possession at the time of his death, because it's rented out, nevertheless, that rental income, a double portion is going to be given to the firstborn, then obviously the cow that remained in the possession of the father at the time of his death, when it has a calf, the firstborn should get a double portion of that too. Why wouldn't he? That's what's being asked. And the Gemara answers that this is what the Baraisa teaches us. It teaches that a case where the animal was leased or rented is similar to a case where it was grazing in the meadow, in that just as in a case where the cow was grazing in a meadow, the enhancement came by itself, and the brothers did not lose money for its sustenance, right? The brothers were feeding the cow anyway. They didn't have to, invest extra money to feed the cow because it's having a calf. It didn't cost them anything. It just happened by itself without them doing anything. And that's why the firstborn is going to get a double portion in that calf. Just like if the father had rented out the cow and it was producing, a few shekels a month in income. So that income keeps coming. The brothers, the other inheritors, the non-firstborn inheritors, they didn't invest anything. They didn't do anything. That's just passive income. And that's why the firstborn is going to get a double portion of that. Now we're on page 124a. So too, in the case of a cow that was leased or rented, the Baraisa is referring only to a case where the enhancement came by itself, as the brothers did not lose money for its sustenance, since it was stipulated that the one who rented or leased it would provide its feed. But if, for example, they learned that the cow was pregnant, and then they brought in a veterinarian to make sure that the birth was going to be okay, and then the veterinarian says, actually, there's a problem. The calf is in the wrong position. I have to do a procedure. It's going to cost you some money. And then they pay the veterinarian that money. Well, now it seems like they've had to make an investment for that calf to be born. So in that situation, maybe the firstborn would not get a double portion of the value of that calf. Let's keep reading. The Gemara continues its discussion of this Baraisa that we've been discussing. In accordance with whose opinion is this Baraisa? It is in accordance with the opinion of Rebbi. Rebbi, when we just say Rebbi by itself, we mean Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the head of the Sanhedrin, who supervised the project of setting down the Mishna in writing in approximately the year 200 of the Common Era. Very important, authoritative sage. A firstborn, says Rebbi, in a different Baraisa, a firstborn does not take a double portion of the enhancement of the property that occurred after the death of the father, right? The one who is leaving property to his sons. Rebbi says, the Baraisa says, that's not Rebbi, the Baraisa says, a firstborn does not take a double portion of the enhancement of the property that occurred after the death of the son's father. Rebbi says, I say that a firstborn does take a double portion of the enhancement of the property that occurred by itself after their father's death, for example, the birth of a calf, but not of the enhancement that orphans caused after their father's death, which I just said before. So that seems to be Rebbi's position. So Rebbi continues, therefore, if they inherited a promissory note indicating a debt owed to their father, the firstborn takes a double portion of the money when it is collected, as this is an enhancement to the estate that came by itself. At the time of the estate, there was a certain amount of money in it. And then somebody who owed the father money paid back that money. The brothers didn't have to do anything. The inheritors didn't do anything. So this is considered part of the estate. And the oldest brother, the firstborn, takes a double portion in this money that came in to pay off a promissory note, money that was owed to the father before he died. And the Gemara adds, in a case where a promissory note emerged against them, meaning that the father, before he died, owed money to someone else. And now that creditor shows up and says to the inheritors, right, to the sons of this man who died, hey, your father owed me money. Here's the promissory note. Now you've inherited an estate, but you need to pay off the debts of your father from that estate. So pay me this. So says Rebbi, in a case where a promissory note emerged against the brothers for their father's debt, the firstborn gives a double portion of the debt. It's not always so great to be the firstborn. You get a double portion of the inheritance, but you also owe a double portion if the father had debts. But the firstborn has an option. If he says, I am not giving a double portion of the debt, and I am not taking a double portion of the estate, he is permitted to do so. And he is exempt from paying a double portion. So it's interesting he has that option if the estate is upside down, right? Now, I don't think that the sons will have to pay debt out of their own pocket for the father. So it's never going to be that upside down. So there is some value in the estate. But, if let's say that the debt is considerable and there's not going to be so much of the estate left, the oldest brother can say, you know what, I don't want to get involved. I'll just be like one of the brothers. I won't take a double portion of what's coming to me, and I won't pay a double portion of what we owe. I'll just be like in the same position as all the other brothers. He can do that. The Gemara asks, what is the reason for the ruling of the rabbis that the firstborn does not receive a double portion of any enhancements that occur after the death of the father? Sounds like the majority who disagree with Rebbi say that if that cow grazing in the meadow has a calf, okay, well, that's happened after the father's death, and that's some kind of like addition to the estate. And we're not going to say that the firstborn gets a double portion of the value of the calf. That's not where the law ended up, but that seems to be what the majority said when they disagreed with Rebbi. So why do they rule that way? Well, the verse states, giving him a double portion. By employing the term giving, that's giving him a double portion, that's where the law of the double portion of the firstborn is stated at Deuteronomy 21:17. And by employing the term giving, the merciful one calls the double portion a gift. So just as a recipient of a gift does not acquire a gift unless it first reaches the possession of the one giving the gift. Right? I can't give you a gift of something that doesn't belong to me. I can only give you a gift of something that I own. Therefore, just as a recipient of a gift does not acquire a gift unless it first reaches the possession of the one giving it, so too, the firstborn does not acquire the portion of the firstborn unless it has first reached the possession of the father before he died, so that he can give it as a bequest at the time of his death. And Rebbi says that the reason for his ruling that a firstborn does receive a double portion of the enhancement is that the verse states a double portion. It juxtaposes the portion of the firstborn to the portion of an ordinary son, in that just as the portion of an ordinary son is inherited even from property that did not reach the father's possession before he died, so too the portion of the firstborn is inherited even from property that did not reach the father's possession before he died. So the Gemara asks, and according to the rabbis as well, isn't the phrase a double portion written? How come they interpret it differently than Rebbi? And the Gemara answers, that phrase can be said to teach a different law, requiring the brothers to give the firstborn both of his portions on one border, i.e. adjoining. So if, for example, what the estate was literally land, so it was like one long rectangular field, and let's say that there were 3 brothers. Okay, so you're going to divide that rectangle into 4 portions, right? Because the firstborn is going to get 2 of them, and the other 2 brothers are going to get 1 each. Now that it's like a long rectangle, and you're going to divide it into 4 portions, the firstborn could end up with a portion on one end of the original estate, and his other part of his portion, of his double portion, on the other end of the original estate, with his 2 brothers having their portions in between. That's very inconvenient to the firstborn. So they would say, no, the firstborn gets a double portion, and his 2 portions should be adjacent to each other, and the other brothers can have their portion here and here. The Gemara asks, well, according to Rebbi as well, isn't the phrase giving him written? And the Gemara answers, meaning what the majority used to justify the idea that the father has to own it, has to be in his possession at the time of his death for the firstborn to get a double portion. So what does Rebbi do with that phrase? And the Gemara answers, that phrase can be said to teach a different law also. That if the firstborn says, I am not taking a double portion of the estate and I am not giving a double portion to any creditor who shows up to collect, he is permitted to do so. Since the inheritance is referred to as a gift, he has the right to refuse it. Now, the Gemara discusses several types of enhancements, the way that the estate could grow by itself, without further work or investment from the inheritors, how the estate could grow after the father's death. Now, obviously, if he hasn't invested in the stock market, it could grow. But we're not talking about that kind of enhancement. So Rav Papa says, with regard to a palm tree that became enhanced by growing broader after the father's death, or land that yielded silt and thereby became enhanced, everyone agrees that the firstborn takes a double portion of that kind of enhancement. When they disagree is in a case when fodder, which is immature grain that has grown stalks but is not yet ripe, becomes full ears of grain. And when date flowers become fully developed dates. Now that's naturally going to happen, right? Or maybe there's some care that has to be, I don't know, the field, you have to make sure that the field is healthy, that it's being irrigated. So there's some extra work that goes into that. But that's not really what they're talking about. What they're saying is if a date palm just grows broader, that's natural enhancement. If the land that you own, is near a river delta and it's collecting silt on that land that has value as fertilizer or, for whatever you use silt for. Okay, so that's naturally collecting there. So that's a natural enhancement and the firstborn gets a double portion. But even though it's natural for grain growing in a field to be immature grain, on 1 month, and then the next month it's, fully developed grain that's worth much more money because now it can be harvested and sold and baked into bread, etc., it's still considered a qualitative difference. It was transformed from not grain, just stalks growing in the field, to grain, which is ready to be harvested, sold, baked, eaten, etc. So that transformation is what Rebbi and the majority are disagreeing about. As one sage, Rebbi, holds that since this enhancement develops by itself, the stalks turn into grain at a certain point in the growing season, so this is it happens by itself. Therefore, the firstborn is entitled to a double portion of it. But the other sage, meaning the rabbis, the majority who disagree with Rebbi, they hold that since the item transformed, it is not considered the same item that was in the father's possession, and therefore the firstborn is not entitled to a double portion of it. And in this point, the majority, as is usually the case, won, right? So we hold like the majority, if it's transformed in this way, the firstborn doesn't get a double portion in the product of that transformation. If there's no transformation, then the firstborn does get a double portion. Rabba Bar Chana says that Rabbi Chia says a judge who acted, i.e., a judge who ruled in accordance with the statement of Rebbi, he has acted legally. And the judge who acted in accordance with the statement of the rabbis has also acted legally. Either way, his decision stands. So even though Rebbi and the sages who disagree with him, had different outcomes, right? They produced different answers on this question. A judge who follows either ruling is not going to be reversed. He's considered to be correct because in either case, he's following a major authority, either the majority of the sages or Rebbi, who is, generally considered so authoritative that you're on very firm ground if you follow Rebbi. Now we're on 124b. And the Gemara explains, Rabbi Chia is uncertain as to whether the principle that the law is in accordance with Rebbi, that's a general principle, in his disputes with his colleague. When Rebbi has a dispute with a colleague, we follow Rebbi. But does that apply when Rebbi has a dispute with several colleagues, right? When it's Rebbi versus one other sage, we follow Rebbi. When it's Rebbi versus a group of sages, do we follow Rebbi or do we then follow the majority? Rabbi Chia was uncertain which way it is, and that's why he said a judge who follows Rebbi is correct, and a judge who follows the majority who disagreed with Rebbi is correct. Rav Nachman says that Rav says it is prohibited to act in accordance with the statement of Rebbi. And the Gemara explains, Rav holds that the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rebbi only in his disputes with a single colleague. But when he has a dispute with multiple colleagues, we follow the majority. And Rav Nachman says his own statement, it is permitted to act in accordance with the statement of Rebbi. And the Gemara explains he holds that the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rebbi, not only in his disputes with a single colleague, but even in his disputes with multiple colleagues. Rava says it is prohibited to act in accordance with the statement of Rebbi, but if a judge when he disagrees with multiple colleagues, but if a judge acted in accordance with the statement of Rebbi, what is done, and the decision stands. He should have followed the majority, but if you follow Rebbi, we're just going to leave it the way it is. And the Gemara explains he holds that it was stated that one is inclined to follow the opinion of the rabbis ab initio, but if a judge rules in accordance with the opinion of Rebbi, his decision stands. The Gemara comments that there are conflicting opinions in the halachic midrash, right? So the midrash is another source of statements by the sages, often about the same period as the Mishnah, certainly in the Gemara. But the midrash it's not, the material that is included in the Mishnah. And some Gemaras will bring down a midrash, but generally the midrash is collecting a collection of teachings from the sages that's not in the Talmud. Rather, it's in the midrash, right? The midrash, but the midrash is how they say it in my neighborhood. And usually the midrash has sort of stories and inspirational teachings, but it can also have legal teachings, as we're seeing here. So, what's going on? The Gemara comments that there are conflicting opinions in halachic midrash as to whether the halacha, the law, is in accordance with the opinion of Rebbi or in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis. The majority disagree with him, as each opinion is supported by a different version of the midrash. Rav Nachman taught a baraisa from the other books of the school of Rav, known as Debe Rav, which is a volume of halachic midrash other than Torat Kohanim, which is a halachic midrash on the book of Leviticus. So the phrase from the verse, by giving him a double portion of all that he has, Deuteronomy 21:17, this excludes the enhancement that the heirs brought about after their father's death, right? That they brought it about by investing time or money, of which the firstborn is not entitled to a double portion. And the Gemara infers, but of the enhancement of the property that occurred by itself after their father's death, he does take a double portion. And the Gemara comments, and whose opinion is this? This is the opinion of Rebbi. Rami Bar Chama taught a different version of the baraisa from the other books of the school of Rav. Of all that he has, this excludes the enhancement of the property that occurred by itself after their father's death, of which the firstborn is not entitled to a double portion. And the Gemara infers, and all the more so, he does not take a double portion of the enhancement that the heirs brought about through their efforts after their father's death. And the Gemara comments, and whose opinion is this? It is the opinion of the rabbis, Accordingly, there is a discrepancy between the Baraisas as to whether the law is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis or of Rebbi. It was worked out later that we follow the rabbis over Rebbi in this. Though that's only with respect to transformational enhancement, but passive enhancement, we follow Rebbi because the heirs do get that. Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says a firstborn does not take a double portion of a loan, i.e. of a debt that is owed to the father. And the Gemara asks, according to whom is this law stated? If we say that it is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, the majority, now that the rabbis say that a firstborn does not take a double portion, even with regard to enhancement of property that is already in the possession of the father, like the cow that had a calf in the meadow, is it necessary to state that he is not entitled to a double portion of a loan? The debt is not in the father's possession at the time of his death. It is merely due to him. Rather, it must be in accordance with the opinion of Rebbi. Although he holds that a firstborn is entitled to a double portion of the enhancement of the property itself, he concedes that the firstborn is not entitled to a double portion of the payment of a debt, as it was not in the possession of his father at the time of his death. So the Gemara asks, but if so, in accordance with whose opinion is that which is taught in a Baraisa? If the sons inherited a promissory note, the firstborn takes a double portion of the payment of both the value of the loan and the interest. It is neither in accordance with the opinion of Rebbi nor the opinion of the rabbis. What's this about a loan with interest? Can a Jew receive interest on a loan that he lent to another person? Yes, if he lent to a non-Jew. If he lends money to a Jew, he's prohibited to take interest. That's ribis, that's prohibited. But you are allowed to, issue a loan for interest to a non-Jew. So if the father had lent money to somebody and now money was coming back and interest was coming back, so then what? Does the firstborn get a double portion of the principal that comes back? Sounds like yes, at least according to Rebbi. Or maybe not, because it was not already in the possession of the father. What about the interest? That seems even more attenuated. So let's see. So the Gemara answers, actually, Shmuel's statement that the firstborn is not entitled to the double portion of the payment of a debt is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, and it was necessary to state it. It might enter your mind to say that with regard to a loan, since the creditor holds a promissory note, it is considered as though it has already been collected, and it is in the creditor's possession. And so too, the firstborn should be entitled to a double portion, even according to the opinion of the rabbis. Therefore, Shmuel teaches us that the loan is not considered to be in the creditor's possession, and the firstborn is not entitled to a double portion. But perhaps, according to Rebbi, we would accept that the firstborn gets a double portion if there's a promissory note with respect to the principal, because it's like that repayment of the principal could be legally considered to be already in the possession of the father at the time of his death. And the Gemara relates, they sent the following ruling from Eretz Yisrael. If the father lent money to a non-Jew, the firstborn takes a double portion of the value of the loan itself, the principal, but not of the interest, as the interest is considered property due to the father, but not yet in his possession, whereas the principal is considered to already be in the possession of the father. And why shouldn't it? Think about it. What did the father lend to this debtor who now owes the estate money? The father lent money that he owned, right? So the fact that now it's out there, but it's going to come back, the father already owned that money. So it makes sense that we should consider that it was already in his possession, and therefore the firstborn does take a double portion of it. But interest, that is money that has not yet reached the possession of the father, had not yet reached it at the time of his death, and therefore that's property due to the father, and the firstborn will not get a double portion of it when it comes in. The Gemara asks, according to whom is this law stated? I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. According to whom is this law stated? If we say it is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, now that the rabbis, the majority, say that a firstborn does not take a double portion even with regard to the enhancement of property, which is already in the possession of the father, is it necessary to state that they would hold that he is not entitled to a double portion of a loan? Since the debt is not in the father's possession at the time of his death, as it is merely due to him, the rabbis would certainly not hold that the firstborn takes a double portion of it. So rather, it must be in accordance with the opinion of Rebbi. And the Gemara asks, and according to the opinion of Rebbi, is it so that the firstborn is not entitled to a double portion of the interest? But isn't it taught in the Baraisa that Rebbi says a firstborn takes a double portion of the loan, meaning the principal, and the interest? Oh, why is that? And the Gemara answers, actually, the law sent from the sages of Eretz Yisrael is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis. And the sages of Eretz Yisrael hold that the rabbis concede that the firstborn receives a double portion of the value of the loan itself, because a loan is considered as though it has already been collected and is in the creditor's possession. By contrast, the interest on the loan is not considered as though it is already in the creditor's possession, and therefore the firstborn does not receive a double portion of its payment, at least according to the rabbis. But what about Rebbi? Sounds like we just learned that Rebbi would say that even the interest, when it comes in, the firstborn takes a double portion of that. We will continue this nail biter tomorrow, God willing, at the regular time, Tuesday, 6 p.m. Pacific. And then a reminder that Wednesday and Thursday, no class, because I'm going to be, God willing, in Austin for the Austin Jewish Film Festival. Our film Guns N' Moses is the opening night gala on October 31st in Austin. If you know someone in Austin, tell them to come and catch a great movie, opening night of the Austin Jewish Film Festival. Okay, Nina is a little under the weather. May she have a complete and speedy recovery. Just a little cold. But I told her, go get some sleep. I will scan the comments for questions. So let me see if I can figure that out. Sharon is telling a crazy story. Maybe this is a response to something else. But she says, my grandfather was a chassid. I have acquired most of his Hebrew texts. I found one volume of Talmud of his that he brought from Poland, and it's Bava Basra. Wow, that's so cool. Awesome. By the way, I'm making a commitment. Like, I have some Hebrew skills. I would consider them entirely inadequate. And I've already agreed, made a commitment, and I'm working with Rabbi Manny Chazanov to work on my Hebrew this year. And I'm committing to each week get through the Torah portion, during the week before Shabbos, both in English and Hebrew, so that when the Baal Korah, the one reading the Torah out loud in synagogue on Saturday morning, reads it in Hebrew, I'm going to have a better possibility of following it. So I'm working on my Hebrew. Aramaic, let's get through Hebrew first. Okay. Pani Gosia. Hi, Pani. I'm sorry if I'm saying Pani wrong. Maybe it's Pani. But Pani Gosia says, it's been a long time since I've been here. I was doing personal hospice for both my parents last year and fell off the wagon of learning. Oh, but what a beautiful mitzvah you did to care for one's parents, toward the end of life. A fantastic, incredible mitzvah, honoring your parents in such an important and profound way. So, yasher koach to you for doing that. And welcome back. It's so great to have you with us again. And Sharon says, caregivers, very, very demanding. Take care of yourself as well. Amen. I agree with that. Now discussion about estate lawyer. I'm not going to get into that, but I agree. If there's an estate being split up, get an estate lawyer. Worth it. Ilanit says, Mazel Tov at AT Daily for the new employee. May all be blessed in this new expansion. Amen. We're trying to operate at an even higher level, creating even more content. Do you guys have the app? Get the app. We have it for iPhone and for Google Play on your phone. I mean, it's just gorgeous. It's, we make it. But the content is absolutely, Nina works so hard, I work hard. We're very proud of the content. So it's always great Torah that we've been creating for the years. But I also just want to say that visually, the aesthetic of the new AT app, I mean, it's beautiful and so user-friendly. You can consume AT daily on it. You get notified. Humor, Torah, Talmud, so much good stuff. But it's like and the Zmanim. It tells you like every day, what time you should say the morning Shema by, when you should say the afternoon prayer by, when is the evening prayer on Fridays. Candle lighting times are there. I think actually candlelighting time is there all week for the upcoming Shabbos. I mean, it's a very, very usable and useful and beautiful app. So we're very proud of the AT app. New video about that coming soon. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Tuesday, at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. All the best, my holy sisters.